Hello, everyone. I'm James Milan. Welcome to this week's Town Manager and COVID-19 update. I am joined, as usual, not as always, but as usual, by our Town Manager, Adam Chapdelaine. We missed you last week, Adam. Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
So, Adam, we always start in the same place. We're going to keep doing it until there's nothing left to say about this sometime soon. And that, of course, is a COVID-19 update. I looked at the numbers quickly before we got on, and to me, it looks like a really steady kind of drip. It's obviously not leveling off entirely, but I'll ask you for the right context. To me, it looked kind of steady state.
I think that is the best way to describe it. I think the good news is we've not seen any type of upward trend of transmission of the virus. The bad news is we haven't really seen a downward trend in the virus. So we are at, as you said, a steady state for transmission within the community. And I think that underscores a need to continue to be vigilant, right? The virus is still here. The virus isn't gone. We want to make sure we protect ourselves and others, and continuing to adhere to public health guidelines, wearing a mask, washing your hands, avoiding interactions with those that are unvaccinated outside of your household. I think they're all important to continue to follow those recommendations. And I think that ties in with a continuing sort of plotting and hopefully speeding up vaccination effort at the state level, where we keep hearing news of more and more vaccine coming into the state. I think just yesterday we learned that an additional 100,000 doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be coming next week to the state. We also learned that the federal government will be providing a much higher level of vaccine to pharmacies, CVS, adding Walgreens, adding Stop and Shop pharmacies, adding Walmart pharmacies. So there should be more and more accessibility for vaccines as the next few weeks roll out. So by continuing to practice good public health safety, as well as when you're eligible getting vaccinated, hopefully will get us to what you mentioned, a time where we don't have to talk about this anymore.
And on the vaccination or vaccine front, I did just want to ask you, last week we spoke to Christine Bongiorno. I was mentioning that, we hadn't seen you in a couple of weeks. Last week's update was with Christine, the head of our Department of Health and Human Services here in town. And I was struck, leaving that conversation, by a distinct tone of optimism from Christine, which she's been very careful about setting expectations, et cetera. But she was quite clear that she had real hope about an influx of vaccines into town, as it works its way from the feds through the state, et cetera, and into town coming up shortly. I just wanted to confirm that you share that view, I assume.
I do. I mean, I think, and she may have shared this, that, I think we all have a general sense of disappointment that the local boards of health aren't going to be continued to be entrusted with some of the broader vaccine distribution. The local team is being entrusted with homebound vaccinations, which will start next week, which is good news, and we're very pleased that we're part of that. But more broadly, we're just glad that vaccines are ramping up. And whether or not we're providing them at the local level, or it's at the pharmacy, or even at a mass vac site, they do seem to be ramping up. When we check the CDC stats, the doses seem to be ramping up. When I hear from state officials, they seem more positive that doses are ramping up. So I think it is good news, right? I don't know what that news that broke this morning or last night, that 15 million doses of J&J vaccine were negatively impacted at a manufacturing facility. I don't know exactly what that means for the next month or so, but it does seem broadly that manufacturing is keeping up with the demand, and that hopefully, like the governor and the president have said, by July timeframe, everybody who wants one is going to be able to have received one.
Great. So we've got a couple of other topics to hit on today. One of them is the fact that you and I touched on this back in February a little bit, when things were still in process in terms of the 2022 budget for town. And I also took a deep dive with Deputy Manager Sandy Pooler at around that time into the budget, but my understanding is that it has now been completed and ready for the public to access. Is that correct?
That is correct. So today we'll make available on the town website, as well as sending out via a town notice on the email, system the FY22, what we call the annual budget and financial plan. And this is the culmination of a lot of work that started back in the fall, all the way through the spring until now, putting together this budget document. And though the ultimate budgetary recommendation to town meeting comes from the Finance Committee, what this document provides the public is not only the detailed budgetary figures, but a lot of information around it to help build residents' understanding of how the town operates its government and how it budgets. So there are strict FY22 budget numbers. There's a deep dive into our revenue collections, a deep dive into our revenue projections, our expense projections, long-range projections, organizational charts for the entire town, as well as each department, workload indicators, really describing what each department does on an annual basis, narrative descriptions of each department, along with both goals and objectives for the upcoming year, as well as accomplishments for the last year. So it's a real comprehensive document that we hope gives residents an opportunity, if they want, to take a deep dive into the workings of town government.
Well, as you say, it is now in residents' hands, and if they want, that information is available. To me, it sounds both daunting to tackle such a thing, but also that you can find answers to virtually, to the vast majority of the questions that you might have as a resident here around either what departments do, how they are organized, and basically how the town runs. As you said, this is beyond the numbers, a document that really kind of opens the door and window on just the way that things run. So again, I wouldn't fault anybody for saying that sounds like way too much information in a sense, but at the same time, I'm pleased to hear it because to me it smacks of again the same commitment to kind of transparency that we all rely on from you guys in town hall, and that I think that we receive in general. So good news there. And last topic for me to ask you about is I touched on this with Department of Planning Director Jenny Raitt recently as well, but that is the fact that Community Development Week is coming up. And I believe it's next week.
Correct. So next week is Community Development Week, and it really gives town government and residents an opportunity to celebrate much of the good that community development block grants via the federal government and the Department of Housing and Urban Development have been able to do in the community. It's a week to highlight the public service programs that have been supported, the public facilities programs that have been supported, the housing programs that have been supported via these funds. So next week on Thursday, the 8th at 5 p.m., there'll be a virtual panel with members of the Department of Planning and Community Development, representatives of FoodLink and Arlington Eats, to really highlight some of that work. Arlington Eats and FoodLink have both been recipients of CDBG funding over the course of several years, both helping them get their built facilities completed and constructed. So that'll be a good opportunity, as I said, to celebrate the good work that these dollars do, and in this case, celebrating battling food insecurity in Arlington.
Yeah, I had mentioned to Jenny as well that we at ACMi have had a chance to speak to leaders from both Arlington Eats and FoodLink in recent weeks. Recently enough to find out that they're quite excited themselves about the opportunity to share both the help that and support they've gotten through the CDBG funds, but also just where things are at in their organizations, which are at continuing to do the essential work they always do, but at an exciting moment in their development. So that's great. Anything else that you wanted to mention? I'm done with my questions.
I would add one final point to the budget piece, that if the 200+ page document that we spoke about is too much, as you mentioned, it might be for some, a couple weeks from now, we'll also be issuing a much smaller document, a 4-page document that we call the Public Annual Financial Report. That is a much shallower dive. Yeah, I think pretty informative for 4 pages look into the Arlington town budget. So we try to give people options that suit the amount of time they have and the amount of depth they want to wade into budget information for the town.
Yeah, I've looked at that 4-pager over the years, and I think you're right. It contains plenty of information, and it certainly is digestible in a way that 200 pages may be like, woo. Anyway, thanks as always for your time, Adam. We really appreciate it. We will see you next week. And I have been speaking, of course, to our town manager, Adam Chapdelaine. I am James Milan. Thanks for joining us for this week's Town Manager and COVID-19 update, and we will see you next time.